Hello, and welcome to Sunny Days Podcast, the podcast for folks to start living their grooviest, most magical lives. I'm your host, Alex the Good Witch, a professional psychic, healer, speaker, and coach. I use my degree in biochemistry, experience as a mental health provider, and spiritual gifts to align your subconscious programming with your conscious desires, guiding you into your dream reality. Here, you will receive practical guidance, insight, and stories that you can apply to create your happiest, most fulfilling life today. If you're ready to feel lit up, capable, and inspired, I invite you to join me on this sunny day. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Sunny Days Podcast. Today, we are talking about connecting to and embodying your future self. So we hear a lot about embodying our higher self, our future self, just showing up as, who we want to be. It's kind of like a fake it till you make it, but with a different spin on it because we aren't faking it, we're becoming it. And I love it. I am here for it. I am not disputing it, but I definitely want to go at it from a unique perspective that I believe is so helpful. And I've seen it help a lot of people. So I am very big on what's called parts work. It has to do with our subconscious, our programming. I'm very big on aligning our subconscious programming with our conscious desires, meaning that most of us, unless we've done this kind of work before, are living very subconsciously and without realizing it. So our brain is mostly made up of the subconscious. Most of our actions are subconscious based. Of course, this has to do with things like breathing, regulating our heartbeat and things like that, can totally be automated. But we actually have a lot of automated processes that we would like to not be automated, that we would like to be conscious decisions. But since the brain is so good at making things automated, it has automated these actions, behaviors, responses, both emotional or thought-based or, actually action-oriented as an automation. And it's done that through our subconscious, through our programming. So what does this have to do with our future selves, embodying our future self? Well, I want to give that background because we're going to be using a similar premise to how I like to work with clients on the subconscious programming, which is very much based in the past, and bringing that tool in embodying our future self. So when it comes to our subconscious programming and the work that we do with parts, I mentioned parts work. So parts work is, and this is just going to be a brief explanation of it. I work with parts work a lot and it's so transformational, but that's not what this episode is on. So I don't want to take up too much of your bandwidth with that. But parts work basically is the fact that our subconscious is made up of all these different parts. And these parts were mostly created when we were very, very young. So think of these parts as personified. Think of these parts as inner children. So instead of having one inner child, you have all these inner children that have all these different roles and perspectives and ways that they go about things, ways that they are actually automated for you. So when you would like to address a situation in a way that aligns with you and best aligns with your future, most of the time it's actually a part that comes in and reacts for you. And this part was created when we were children. So it's kind of like an inner child of us. And they're the ones kind of running the show until we intervene and do this kind of work to really help ourselves be the conscious creators of our life rather than going about under the subconscious programming that makes up our mind and makes up the majority of our perspectives, decisions, thoughts, emotions, etc. So that's my little touch upon parts work just for context. So something that we do with parts work is being able to like identify what are these parts, like what are they? What are their roles? What are they like? What are their views? What are their perspectives? And the reason I'm bringing this up is because whether or not you do parts work, it's not super widely used, so you may not have heard of it before. Whether or not you do anything like that, or you even do like inner child work or shadow work, things of that nature, we're all very familiar with our past selves and versions of our past selves. So these versions of our past selves, we see them all the time, they come up. They come up even if we're not addressing them as like quote unquote parts, or like subconscious programming. We can tap into them and think of them, and they come up even, without our permission, like I was talking about how they, run the show a lot. But just for, today's lesson and how we're talking about future selves, we have these past selves that we very easily identify with, and that we very easily are able to, discern and identify and understand because we're familiar with them. They're the past. So we can picture things like our inner child, or we can maybe feel ourselves reacting in a way that feels like we, would have reacted when we were young. Maybe we feel like we're like throwing a temper tantrum or something, something's really triggering, and all of a sudden, we're slamming our door, or we're shutting down, or we're doing things that we used to do as a child, right? So our past selves are very like accessible to us, is what I'm saying. We're very familiar with them. They're very accessible to us. We feel like we can have more of an understanding with them because we can identify them. We feel like we know them. We feel like we know who they are and what they are. To different extents, of course, because there's so much work to be done there, but we can just mentally wrap our mind around these past versions of ourselves. Future versions of ourselves feel very elusive, right? They feel so different. And logically, we think, oh, past version of ourselves, like I can easily kind of bring up some past version of me because, like, that was me. That was me. And sometimes it feels like it still is me, like that version of me still lives in me. Like they're still here, right? But future selves don't feel that way. Future selves feel like something that have yet to happen yet. Future selves feel like parts of us that haven't been created yet, that we haven't identified with yet, we haven't become yet. And that is what I want to talk about, is that big, big difference between past selves and future selves, and how seeing future selves as more accessible and almost through like the lens of past selves can really help us embody these future selves more, and therefore become them more effectively and efficiently, faster even. And the goal of doing that, if you don't already know, or don't haven't already kind of tapped into like, embody your future self, embody your higher self. The reason behind doing this for most is to quote unquote collapse timelines. Or another way of putting it, if that seems so like far out there, would be that when you live as this future self, this higher self, you live in your future life, or your higher life. That version of you that you're embodying, that you're channeling, that you're becoming, they live in a different life. They live in this life of the future, this life of what's better, what's possible, this life that you want. And that would be the point. And I agree with that. I agree that when you embody, a version of you to the point where you become them, then you can't help but live a different life. I'm not saying you can completely control or manipulate things outside of you. You have an effect on them. 100% you have an effect on them. I just say that caveat just because sometimes we may have a certain vision of like what we think this is going to control or manipulate, and it may have like a different effect than what we expect. I'm not saying necessarily a bad way or anything like that. I'm just saying being open to being bigger and better, however bigger and better may look. But it does have an effect on the situation. Things can't be the same if you show up differently, if you genuinely show up differently. And this is true on every level, down to molecular level. If you're not familiar with me, my degree is in biochemistry and molecular biology. So as far as even like the molecular level goes, when something changes, then it's sending out different signals, different frequencies, and the environment is going to have to change with it, or it's no longer going to be suited for that environment. But things can't stay exactly the same. Something has to change. And then same with an environment. The environment has an effect on the subject as well. And something will have to change or they won't be suitable for each other. And I believe the same is true on a macro level, as most things, reflect each other on and on both going up to the macro level and down to the micro level. So when we embody our future self and become our future self, our life outside of us must adapt to that. It must respond to that. We have an effect on what's around us in some way, but it can't be exactly the same because they would no longer be suitable for each other. There has to be some kind of adaptation or some kind of, exiting whatever it is, but it's not going to stay the same. And that's also why people end up subconsciously afraid of bettering themselves because they know that there's going to be change. And even if it's a positive change, a change that we want, change is scary. And we know deep down that things aren't going to be exactly the same. And as much as we may want change, we're very familiar with things being exactly as they are. And it can feel kind of out of control to have things being changed, even if it seems irrelevant to the situation. Things are going to change, circumstances, dynamics, those things are going to change. So anyway, as far as embodying your future self, your higher self, now we have a bit more of why, one would want to do that and, how that kind of works to facilitate these changes and bring you along into a new chapter, a future, a different life, hopefully a bigger, better life. Definitely a bigger, better life if, how you're changing and what you're striving for is, constructive and bettering yourself and being a future more exalted version of yourself. So that's the reason why we do it and how we do it. Now, my perspective that I feel like just helps streamline this and helps just make this so much more powerful and effective is being able to see our future selves, these versions of ourselves, just like we see our past selves. So our past selves are accessible. We feel like we get it. We feel like they exist. We feel like they're a part of us. And like we could tap into them if we want them. Like I can act like my 12-year-old self if I wanted to, or I would at least know what that feels like. And I could sense that she's still like lives in me, well, same with our future self. So why is that? Because time is not linear. So we experience time linearly, which means, how you experience time. Like time is moving linearly in a forward direction. The past has already happened. We're in the present right now. The future hasn't happened yet. That's how we experience time. That's that linear experience of time. But time is not linear. And this is not a spiritual concept. It's used in spirituality, like it is spiritual, but it's a scientific concept. So for anyone who just, however your mind works and whatever different kinds of evidence or different kinds of perspectives you need to understand certain things, it is scientific as well. So we know the time is not linear. Time is happening concurrently. We just experience it linearly as humans on Earth with our human brain. Just in our like reality, we experience it linearly. But time exists and time is relative. So we're so used to thinking the past has already happened. It's this familiar concept that we can connect to, but the future is so unknown, uncertain. It hasn't existed yet. So in order for me to tap into a future self, I have to like create a future self, and I don't really know what she's like. And tapping into her is kind of this like intangible, made up thing. It's not really like she exists. Um, that's how we would see it linearly. And when we're doing this embodiment work, subconsciously seeing it that way, even if you're not like consciously downing it, like subconsciously seeing it through the eyes of like linear time, which you would because you're a human, it's gonna like throw in that doubt and throw in that feeling of like instability or uncertainty. So I really want you to connect to the fact that that future you is existent. And that's not just a notion. There are those future versions of you because the future exists now in time. Those future versions of you exist. They're there. They're just as much there as past versions of you. Your brain is just more familiar with past versions of you, but they're there and they exist. So just like you can think about past versions of you and feel into that and feel what they were like and sense how they are a part of you, your future versions of you are a part of you as well. They're in you, they are you. So when we talk about embodying these future versions of you, I would refrain from thinking about becoming them because they're already there. You already are them. It really is more about embodying. And then, yes, from a human, like a linear point of view, you will start to see how you do become them, right? But really understanding that they already exist. You don't have to create them. You don't have to create yourself to become them. Um, it is this merging of this already existent thing, and using them, and knowing that they're already a part of you and your identity. It's so easy to think of past you as all these parts that make up your identity, but future you is just as existent. So you can really sit with future you being a part of you and your identity. So if you are in the process of becoming, as far as linear time goes, like let's say you're in the process of becoming a successful business owner, and that's something that you would like to be, and you would like to embody future you who is a successful business owner, really understand and like teach yourself the concept that that version of you is there. It's like fully existing. It's fully existing. She is alive and well and living her life. Just like past you like exists, like little you is there. Think of the same way as like this successful business owner you. You don't necessarily have to create her. You don't even necessarily, if we're going along this concept, have to become her. She is you, you are her just as much as you are, 12-year-old you. And that is a paradigm of you. So when you are able to connect to that, you can start to be like, I'm her right now. I'm just as much her as I am made up of me from when I was young. So it's not this like outside entity or this intangible concept I'm trying to connect to. She's like a part of my identity. Like me right now in this moment, in the present, am successful business owner because I'm in the process of having her be manifested in like the 3D, in the physical, but she already exists. The only difference is our limited brains and how we conceptualize time and how we conceptualize the physical versus the process and the intangible. But whenever there is any kind of change that happens and you see this change, that change didn't just happen. with you seeing it. It wasn't like, oh, this change took 3 days, or this was an overnight success. It's not, that is like the smallest amount of what happened. It's mostly this whole process, this whole implicit process that is going on in quote unquote the backgrounds to our brains. And like that is all part of it. That is all wrapped up in the same entity. That entity has existed in the process before it became like physical and visible to your eyes. So same with you becoming your future self, like this successful future version of you, you're already her. You know, the fact that you're thinking of being that and like wanting to embody that and starting to, you know, have that perspective of, oh, what can I do to become her, shows that you're in the process. You're in the process. And the process is this is the entity. Process is the entity. You just may not see it in the physical world yet and have the physical evidence, but the process is the entity. The process is just as much evidence of existence as seeing the actual quote unquote results, right? So you can tell yourself that like you are her. The fact that you're even remotely thinking of her, wanting to be her, whatever it is, like you are her. She exists. You think of it this way, like you are catching whiff of her because she exists. Not like, oh, from nothing, you're conceptualizing this future version of you that you want to then like create. You are catching whiff of her because she already exists. You know, you are conceptualizing her, not in the fact that you are making her, but you are actually like observing or seeing or witnessing something that already exists. It already exists. You can kind of think of it too, if you're a creative person, you know, and you get this like creative idea and you like make that idea, it already existed. Like it came to you existing, you know, like you didn't sit down and stare at a blank piece of paper and then was like trying to like create this thing out of nothing. Like I'm talking about an idea that comes to you, and it's formed and exists and it's like I need to make this. That came to you. It already exists, you know? It's just like this in the process part, as far as our brains go, because there's like the physical meaning results and the intangible meaning process, but this entity is like fully formed and that's how it came to you. So same with the fact that you are connecting to whatever future you want to be, whatever future version this is, higher self, whatever. It's because like it exists now in the present, and like that's how you were even able to like have the concept of them. You didn't have to create them or make them. They're here right now. You are them. So start to reframe your practice, or if you haven't gotten into that practice yet and this is inspiring you to you know, embody future self, really think of it as like you, the one listening to this right now, like you are the same you that becomes successful business owner. You are the same you that, you know, blah, 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 whatever it is. You are that you. Just like you are the same you who, you know, went to Disneyland when you were 8. You know, you are the same you, right? So you are the same you as you are past you, as you are future you. You are that you right now. So you have everything that you need to have this come to a physical result. But being in the process of it is just as viable, just as much evidence of its existence, just as important. And keep in mind the importance, because I think that we downplay like, oh, it doesn't count or doesn't matter until it's like in the physical and result oriented. And we like get really hard on ourselves and we feel like failures, and maybe we even want to quit and like all these things. And if anything, we make the journey like so sucky by doing that, and like not enjoyable, and thinking that it doesn't matter until the result, or we can't be happy or whatever until the result. But the process is just as much of the entity, just as much showing its existence. It's here, it exists. You can be in it, you can enjoy it, and it's also important. It's also so important. There is no result without process. Even things that seem like overnight successes, you know, or it seems like they, how did they just get that out of thin air, become that out of thin air? There was a whole process too. There's a whole process too with all of that. So really keep that in mind to yourself to make the journey that much more enjoyable, to keep you encouraged, and yeah, to keep you enjoying enjoying it, enjoying where you are now, and as well as where you're coming from and where you're going. So I hope that this was a helpful episode for y'all. I was so excited to make it. I love this kind of stuff. And if you are interested in, working more with aligning your subconscious programming to your conscious desires, including doing more embodiment work, being able to work through your blocks, your patterns, being able to work through your dynamics with other people, your dynamics with situations that you face, and how to radically change all that to be in line with what you want, being able to give yourself the freedom and the power to choose, rather than to just be stuck subconsciously going through what your programming like makes you do without your permission, which again is natural, and like that's literally how we work as like humans with our brain, until we start to dissect that and work through it, so it's not on you. But yeah, if you are ready to really dive into that and to be able to create the life from a free, powerful perspective that you want, and that you can totally have once you set yourself free, then definitely check out my free bird program. I'll have the link in the show notes with a special discount offer as well. So definitely check that out. I'd love to see you in there, and I'll see that you got it from the podcast, from the special code. So thank you for listening. And other than that, I will see you in the next episode. Have a sunny day. Thank you for tuning in to the Sunny Days podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and catch more of my free content by following me at Alex the Good Witch on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. If this episode resonated with you, please take a screenshot, post it in your stories, and tag me on Instagram. I appreciate your time here with me today. Peace and love to you all, and I will see you in the next episode.